This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I thought we had a decent start. We were, playing our game. We were moving. We were skating, and then we kind of gave up some odd man rushes and started trying to do too much, and they took advantage of it and they capitalized there to get that first one. And it's a game of bounces.
Corey, it is a game of bounces. Hi, Steve. And
Steve,
I'm ready.
Brief cameo.
I'm ready for the
video
playoffs. I will be very transparent with everybody. It is hard to look at the last couple of weeks, maybe even since the Winter Olympic break, and sit here and try to dissect this team as if the way they are playing is going to spill into the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't buy it, but I will tell you, if there are 50% of the people who feel the way I do, that how you finish isn't how you're going to start the playoffs, there's 50% out there who believe the opposite is true. And so there's this interesting back and forth, I think, out there in hockey land, and maybe it's just because we're finishing out the regular season and we can only go off of the game that they just played.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then yeah, you're looking at it and saying they're just not playing as well as they were before. I just think there are circumstances at play as to why they are playing the way they are. But have we not factored in they were pulling in some points here not too long ago, even when they weren't playing particularly well, and that the 82-game season, each stretch should not be judged the same. The beginning of the year is going to be judged differently than the end of the year, and it's going to be judged differently than the middle of the year. And so I think that needs to be hammered home, because this is like pulling teeth to a degree. And I understand people's concerns a little bit. But man, I
Were you getting blowback after the game last night?
It's not necessarily blowback. I just think it's an unwillingness to a degree to look at this stretch for what it is and understand that what is coming, they're two different things. And that they don't necessarily mean what you're doing now is going to happen then. It may, but I think that's going to be more coincidence than anything.
Well, fans are worried about the fact that the Lightning have gone 2 games without getting any points. I will remind them that the Lightning finished a 7-game homestand, getting points in 6 of them, and they went on a 4-game road trip before that and got points in all 4.
Right.
So in an 11-game span, they got points in 10 of 11, and they did quite well to win most of those games. They only lost 1 game in regulation to Montreal. There were a couple overtime losses in there as well. So from a point standpoint, the Lightning, just until very recently, they were getting points. Now, how were they playing? I thought they turned things around when they went out west. They had 3 very, very good games against Seattle, Vancouver, and Edmonton. You might say, well, Seattle is kind of struggling since that game, really. That's true. Vancouver has been in last place, but Vancouver has won some games too. You can't just assume because the opponent is near the bottom of the standings that you're going to win. And I thought they had an excellent game in Edmonton. They had a good homestand. I'm not sure they were perfect in every game, but they played more good hockey than bad hockey in the homestand. So they did what they had to do to get their X. They got their X right before the 7th home game. Now they've gone on the road. And I think this is a question of how important are these games down the stretch. If you are concerned about where you finish, they are important. If you are a believer, and you just brought this up, whether it's 50% on the other side of the ledger from you or a different number than that, but there are definitely people out there who believe that you want to be playing well going into the playoffs. Lightning are not playing well right now. In the last 2 games, they've not played as well as they did in the previous 11, in which they got points in 10. We can see that. They've been on the wrong end of a couple of, if not lopsided scores. I think they've been outplayed in both the games. So, look, I think everyone's in agreement. They're going to have to play better when the playoffs begin.
Yeah.
The question is, how important are these games and how much of a bellwether are these games for what's going to happen in the playoffs? And I think you'll get a wide variety of opinion on there, or maybe one of 2 opinions. One is it's important, and the other camp says it's not important. Eric Erlinson, and if you don't subscribe to lightninginsider.com, you should, because he has the pulse of the team. He has had it for 25 years now. He has the historical perspective that comes with having covered this team for as long as he has. And his article today was really about the balance that you're talking about. I mean, he was talking more about health and resting and getting ready for the playoffs as opposed to getting the results and quote unquote playing the right way going into the playoffs. He's like, ideally you'd like to get both, but he has brought up some seasons in which the Lightning have finished record-wise quite well to round out the regular season and got bounced in the first round. 2019, they finished well. Obviously, they won 62. In fact, they were kind of pushing to get to 62 because at that time it would have tied the record, and it did tie the record for most regular season wins. They lost 4 straight to Columbus. Last year, they finished well down the stretch in the regular season. Florida didn't. And look what happened in that series. The Panthers jumped all over them in the beginning of the series. There were other years. I think the 2021 season, the Lightning didn't finish particularly well. Now, they were the defending champs, and they had in their toolbox the necessary tools to elevate when the playoffs began, and they did. But, they lost their last 2 games against the Panthers and Sunrise. That was when we had those 2 and sometimes 3 games in a row in the same city because of the COVID protocols. But, the Lightning lost the last 2 in Sunrise to fall into 3rd in the playoffs, and they went to Sunrise. They went back to Sunrise and won the first 2 games in that series, and they won that series. So I think we have evidence that how you finish in a regular season does not necessarily – it's not necessarily predictive of how a playoff series is going to go. The Lightning, I want to say the year that they lost to Montreal in the first round, John Cooper's first full year as a head coach, they had 4 games in the final week, and in the 4th game, like the 4th to last game, Ben Bishop got hurt, missed the rest of the regular season, missed that playoff series. That was the biggest takeaway the final week of the regular season. The Lightning won all 4. They won their last 4 games. I think 3 were at home, and then they went to Washington, and they won in a shootout to get to 2nd. And then they got swept by the Canadiens. So it feels uncomfortable to see the team play not well. I get it. But I'm kind of looking at last night's game as, did anyone get hurt? No, thankfully. Doesn't seem like anyone who started the game was injured during the game. Did the Lightning give some players a little time off, continue to give them time off? Yes, Brandon Hagel and Anthony Cirelli have now had a little bit of time off here to the extent that they are day-to-day. They're getting their bumps and bruises healed. I think that's important. We had a lot of questions, Greg, I would say in the last 3 weeks about resting players down the stretch. Will the Lightning rest players? That was at the forefront of a lot of fans' minds, that they've had this brutal schedule they have after the Olympic break. It is important to get recharged for the start of the playoffs. So they're doing that. I mean, some of it is injury related, I think, but it's not load management per se. But, if Brandon Hagel and Anthony Cirelli are nursing something, why would you play them in these games that matter nothing in terms of making the playoffs? Sure. John Cooper has been pretty consistent about saying first, second, or third. He'd like to finish first, but it's not a be-all, end-all. And if that's your attitude as an organization, I think you're going to err on the side of, let's do what we need to do to get ready for the playoffs in terms of health and energy, more than how we're playing. Now, Coop is not happy with what he has seen the last 2 games, and they will try and be better and play better in these last 4 regular season games. But speaking personally, I am not too worked up about what has happened on the ice in the last 2 games. You talk to Phil, you may get a very different response. He he tends to believe that, you want to be playing well going into the playoffs. And he has some firsthand experience about that, right? So ultimately, the Lightning are going to be judged not on what happens in games 76 to 82, but on what happens game 1 of the playoffs and beyond. And
I mean, you have a better feel for this.
That.
The 4 times 04 might be a bad example because they were rolling in January, right? And they were
rolling in January and February, but then they were not rolling. I mean, they were still good, but they didn't finish. You know what I remember about 04? They played the Islanders in the first round, and they lost 2 games late in the season to the Islanders, one in Tampa, one on Long Island. And there was some chatter, especially on the Islanders side, about, it was the 1 versus the 8. That was when we had 1 versus 8. Like you had the 3 division winners in the conference. That was 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 through 8 just based on points. So the Lightning were the 1 seed. So they faced the Islanders, the 8 seed. So the Lightning clearly were favored, but the Islanders were, these last 2 games in the regular season, the Lightning lost, and then the Islanders won game 2 in Tampa. So it was 1-1 going to New York for game 3, and the Lightning won the next 3. I mean, the games were close, but they won the series in 5. So I don't think that team finished. I mean, they didn't finish like 10-1, Greg. I mean, they might have been. I'd have to look it up. Whether it was
that's not
6-4 or something like that. They were okay, but they didn't like barrel through the gates to start the playoffs. They elevated when the playoffs began.
The 5 times they played for a Stanley Cup, right? Can you, off the top of your head, say, 2 out of the 5 they were rolling into the playoffs and it carried in, or how many of them were they were just kind of mezza, and they handled their business methodically.
I don't remember any of the 5 them just dominating. Like on one of these stretches that we've talked about, 23-2-1 or 19-1-1 through the end of the regular season where they went deep in the playoffs. Now, there were some interesting matchups. I remember in 21-22, the Lightning had struggled with Toronto, and they faced the Leafs twice at home, if I'm remembering this right, late in the regular season. And it did look like they were going to be a first-round matchup at that point, where the Leafs were 2 and the Lightning were 3. And Florida was going to be 1. Florida won the President's Trophy that year. So they were ahead. It certainly looked like it was going to be 2-3. And the Lightning had struggled with Toronto, and Toronto came into Tampa in the second-to-last game and hammered the Lightning, won convincingly. So there was a lot of emphasis put on that next game played, which the Lightning won convincingly. So you go into the playoff series, and it was a 7-game series. Like, did it matter that much that the Lightning beat the Leafs in that final meeting? Who knows? I mean, maybe, maybe not. I don't remember that 22 team, and that was the 22 team. So you asked about going to the final. That team lost in the final, but it got to the final.
Right.
I don't know that late regular season game against Toronto mattered a ton, mattered a medium amount, mattered a little. It may have mattered, but that one game probably mattered more than how the Lightning finished against the other teams they faced, in the last week of the regular season. So, look, we're not coming on the show trying to make excuses for how the Lightning are playing.
No.
They're not playing as well, but I think it's understandable. We knew last night's game was going to be a tough game in terms of, like, they were finishing a back-to-back. They traveled from Buffalo. It wasn't a long trip, but, the Sens were there waiting, rested, everything on the line. And actually, I thought the Sens had an advantage, but they didn't have a huge advantage through 40 minutes. And they had an advantage, not on the scoreboard. It was 1-1. I thought they outplayed the Lightning for a portion of the second period, but Corey Perry's right. Like, the Lightning started well. They forced some early saves from Ullmark, and after they had some tough sledding in the middle of the second period and had a defensive mistake in which Spence scored to make it 1-0, they get the goal back from Nick Paul. That's been so, I mean, the team is the team, right? But what are individual players doing? And we've seen elevated play from Nick Paul. Just part of it is Cirelli is out of the lineup. So Paul is getting more of an opportunity to play. He played over 18 minutes against Buffalo. And if you were listening to the broadcast last night, which I know you were, Maroon was telling the story like he ran into Nick Paul in the Ottawa hotel. They were in the gym at the same time. And Nick was saying, I felt like I was really getting into the game. I'm like, well, that makes sense. He played 18 minutes. He's getting a regular shift.
I remember that conversation you had.
Yeah, and then he scored. So Maroon said, I think you're going to get one tonight against your former team. So he was like, I said that to him, and he scored. So he had a good game last night. He said 3 very good face-off games in a row, going back to the Boston game. So that's something that I think we can look at and maybe take out of some of these games, like personal confidence. Like if Nick Paul's game is going to be built up by getting more of a chance to play here due to some injuries, and it helps him get his game in gear going into the playoffs, I think that is important. As far as the team game goes, though, they were there. It was not a 6-2 game last night. I do think Ottawa outplayed the Lightning, but early in the third, the Lightning, they gave up 2 early goals in the third, but even before it became 2-1, they put a ton of pressure on Ullmark. Gensel hit the post. Point had a chance. I think Paul just missed the net. Like they had several passes at the net to make it 2-1, and then the Sens kind of get a bounce. Now, the Lightning got a bounce on the Paul goal, so turnabout is fair play. But, the goal that Zetterlund scored nicked off Chernak's arm. That goes in, and then Johansson, it was really the one really weak goal that he allowed was the Sanderson goal for 3-1 right after that. And you're kind of like, So that's a big swing for Ottawa, but the Lightning pushed back. I thought they controlled the next several minutes. They get the goal from Perry to make it 3-2. And Jacob Pelletier almost tied the game. It maybe was Ullmark's biggest save of the night. He got a piece of it with his glove. If that goes in, it's 3-3. And if you're Ottawa, you're like, how do we blow this lead? How is this happening? Instead, Ullmark makes the save, and probably within a shift, Gord gets called for a penalty that, it was a borderline call. Let's just say that. And that happens sometimes. It was a game in which there weren't a lot of penalties anyway. That was just the 3rd penalty of the game that was leading to a power play. And the Sens scored on it. The Lightning had a challenge. They missed on the challenge. So the Sens got another power play and scored again. And it was game over, right? Like it's 3-2 becomes 5-2 in a 13-second span. That's how the game became lopsided. But the Lightning could have grabbed the lead or they could have tied the game in the 3rd period. So we might be having a different conversation if this game went to overtime, let's say, or they won it, which was certainly possible had the 3rd period unfolded a little bit differently. It didn't. So, now we got a 3-way tie atop the Atlantic Division. All 3 teams have 4 games left, and the Lightning and Canadiens play a head-to-head tomorrow in Montreal.
I know a lot of people, by the way, the Nick Paul goal last night might be the biggest positive I took from that game. Honestly, I know it's an individual player, but that individual player we have been talking about as being key to them heading into the postseason, particularly if there are going to be some significant injuries to this Lightning team before the playoffs begin. We also have people asking about Dominic James again and kind of getting an update there.
Well, he's skating. That's all I can tell you.
That's all we can give you. But
yeah.
I
Other
know,
than what he said to Ed Encina, which you mentioned on the show.
So that's what it was
yesterday. He's like, I'd like to come back for the beginning of the playoffs, but that's my goal, quote unquote, is what Dominic James said. Whether that actually transpires,
Listen,
who
folks,
knows? And we are still waiting. I do think the team is going to have some sort of release on the Holmberg injury timetable. That has not happened yet. They may be waiting. They may honestly be waiting to get back to Tampa and have the Lightning doctors look at him. But I think we can tell which way the wind is blowing. This is not a short-term injury. So just brace yourself. It's going to be a longer-term injury, but the exact timetable or the range of that timetable we haven't gotten yet. But I think we will. I think the Crozier injury was 8 to 10 weeks. The James injury was 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks. I can't remember what it was, but we'll probably get something like that about Holmberg at some point. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No. To Eric's point today on lightinginsider.com, I think a lot of this is more about health than it is about playing well at the right time. But when we start talking about the playoffs, understand there are a couple of players I am more intrigued about than the team collectively playing well at the end of the year. And that would be Nick Paul, who I think is going to be super important to this team. There's a depth scoring option that he provides in addition to his face-off abilities, which I think could be a bigger deal. Now, of course, you want Victor Hedman ready to rock and roll. Who wouldn't? I think they've shown they have some depth on the back end, that they can maybe withstand that a little bit more than if they're not getting the depth scoring, which a guy like Nick Paul can provide. If you want to throw Oliver Bjorkstrand in that category, I'm okay to do it. The other person, quite frankly, is Braden Point. Mm-hmm. So there are two players that, for me, will be super important in that first round beyond the obvious, which is goaltending, and if you want to get into special teams play, that's fine, all of that. But if we narrow it down to a couple of players that you're looking at who could significantly change an outcome of a series, it is Braden Point because of his elite ability, just having a down year.
Yeah.
And the second option would be Nick Paul, because Nick Paul has shown the ability to perform in big games, and we just haven't seen a lot of it this year for various reasons. But if he reverts back to the Nick Paul we've seen before, and Braden Point does as well come playoff time, that is almost like adding two new players at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is more important than I'd like to see them finish the next 4 games strong. And
right.
I'm not minimizing that, because maybe part of that, these next 4 games, is that Braden Point and Nick Paul finish strong.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. And maybe there's confidence individually that moves into the playoffs. Ironically, I don't think it's more about a team getting that confidence if they finish 4-0 and that trickles into the playoffs. I don't believe that. I do think a player's confidence can trickle into the postseason. I do. If Nick Paul sees 2 or 3 goals.
That's what my point was about Nick
Paul. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, that to me, even if the Lightning were to go 0-4 and everyone's, I can't believe it, they're in third place, they're going to be taking on Buffalo, and we can touch on that. If that comes, and I'm not going to say at the expense, but let's say with that, though, Nick Paul collects 6 points in 4 games and Braden Point ends up recording 4 to 5 goals, I'm going to look at that and say, you know what? That could be a little bit of an X factor, because you know what? Buffalo didn't see that.
Right.
Montreal didn't see that. And that's something else they got to prepare for.
The thing that's going to be weird about these last 4 games, let me just back up. I agree with you. I think if Nick Paul can get some confidence going in his game and some continuity in his game, he played less last night. I'm not sure if that was a function of just the game, how the game unfolded, but he was down from the 18-plus minutes against Buffalo. He was in the 13-minute range last night. It was a weird game for ice time as I look at the ice time for the Lightning. I mean, there wasn't one player over 21 minutes. It's a little weird. I mean, they kind of roll the 4 lines. We can talk about the Syracuse line, if you want to call it that, Geeky Duke and Peltier, and how they looked. And I thought they did give the Lightning some energy. But these last 4 games. So tomorrow will be billed as a big game because you got first place on the line. How important is it to Montreal? How important is it to the Lightning? And maybe slightly more important to one team than the other. Maybe the Lightning are like, we have to get back on track after losing 2 in a row. Maybe Montreal's like, we really want home ice. We love playing at home. They're a little different boat than Buffalo because they did have a playoff run last year and they got some of that experience. So maybe they're like, whether it's first or second, which is what Mike Harrington was talking about with Buffalo, like Montreal's like, if we win this game, if we lose this game, they're on the wrong side of the tie break against both Buffalo and the Lightning. So maybe Montreal's like, this game really matters to us. First round preview, potentially, if Buffalo finishes in first, because we know these 3 teams are going to finish 1, 2, 3. Who knows? After that, you've got at Boston. I think Boston is going to make the playoffs. Boston has not yet clinched a playoff spot. They've been kind of cobbling together some overtime losses here, and they only have 3 games left. It's possible Ottawa could catch Boston. It is possible, depending on what Ottawa does down the stretch, and Boston too. I think Boston is going to get into the playoffs, but I don't believe they are going to be in a position where they have clinched by Saturday. So they are going to have something at stake. So the next 2 games, teams are going to have something at stake. The Lightning then finish at home. The home game on Monday against Detroit could mean everything to Detroit or nothing. It's possible the Wings could be eliminated by Monday. They literally blew a regulation win last night. They gave up a sixth attacker goal in like the last 15 seconds to Columbus, a team neck and neck with them, and lost in a shootout. It was a devastating loss for the Red Wings. They are not out of it yet, but they're going to have to basically go on a run and get some help at this point. We'll see where they are on Monday. If they have nothing to play for, I'm not sure how much you can read into a game like that. Like maybe the Lightning win it, and we're going to come on the show on Tuesday and be like, well, Detroit, kind of threw their sticks on the ice.
Yeah.
They kind of exhale because they just got eliminated. If Detroit has something to play for, we're going to have kind of the third straight game where you have an opponent that's motivated, but the Lightning really don't have as much at stake. And then the final game is against a team that's been playing loose and free for like a month. So what do we make of game 82 no matter the result? Like you're saying, if you go 1-4, if you go 4-0, how are the Lightning playing? Like when we get to the playoffs, both teams are going to be on equal footing. That's my roundabout point that I'm trying to make here. I'm not sure that in the next 4 games, maybe tomorrow's game, but the next 4 games, in all likelihood, the Lightning are going to be in a different kind of emotional place, standings place than their opponents, with the exception of tomorrow's game. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like we can't look at what the Lightning do against the Rangers in game 82 and say, well, this is going to tell us what's going to happen in the playoffs. The Lightning might play really well against the Rangers, who have nothing to play for in game 82, and lay an egg in game 1, or the opposite. The Rangers are free and loose, and the Lightning are like, let's just get through this game, right?
Yeah.
And then they get ready for game 1 of the playoffs. So this just backs up kind of what we're both saying at the beginning of the show, which is, at least to us, down the stretch in the regular season, I mean, knock on wood, let them get through these last 4 games with no additional injuries, get some guys as healthy as they can get, and get the battery recharged for the start of the playoffs. I was very happy they came out of last night's game, apparently with no additional injuries. I mean, honestly, after what happened to Holmberg on Monday, I was like, well, result aside,
but
at least we didn't see somebody like go down and have to like leave the game and not come back.
But I think that's, and I agree with you. That's my point as well. I mean, I'm coming away from these games thinking, okay, great, yes, play fit. Anybody get hurt? Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to poo-poo these last 4 games, but you know what? Maybe I am. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. Is there anything we need to dissect more from the game last night? Any observations that we think is
well, the most surprising statistical development from last night's game, or result from last night's game, the Ottawa Senators are the number 1 face-off team in the NHL, and Claude Giroux is the number 1 face-off guy in the NHL. And the Lightning went 39-25 in the circle, and Claude Giroux went 2-6. Figure that one out. But another good game in the circle for Nick Paul. I can give you the numbers. Centerman by centerman. Paul went 7-4. Connor Geekie went 10-2. Good for him. Point went 11-7. These are the guys who took the most. Gord went 8-8. So Gensel went 3-2. Gergensons went 0-2. So I don't know what to make of that, but if it's something the Lightning can build on, guys get a little more confident with their face-offs, great. We know that they have struggled in 2 of the 3 games, though, against Boston in the circle, big time, and we'll see how they do on Saturday. I know that's kind of a minor point in a game in which they lost 6-2, but the other thing is the Geekie line with Duke and Peltier. I thought, so Geekie is the one who is known the best by Lightning fans. I learned, I didn't know this at the time, but I learned that they are aligned together in the AHL. I was talking with Paul Kennedy this morning, and he was like, yeah, we discovered that on Scripps. I mean, we could have called Lucas Favali. He would have told us. But I knew that they played power play together. But based on their production, I didn't know if Chafee was in there, because Chafee's one of their they're 3 of their top 4 scorers. Chafee is also in the top 4. So there's a lot of familiarity there, and I think it helped Geekie. Geekie looked like a guy who was just playing his game. Mm-hmm. And he knew his right winger. He knew his left winger. They've been together, if not the whole year, much of the year. Certainly they have a lot of familiarity. They've had success as a line in the minors. I think it helped him.
So
I wouldn't be surprised if they stay up here, and
let
continue
me ask you
to
this.
play.
You mentioned injuries. I agree with you. I'm intrigued by that line enough where I would sit here and say, would you just play them the next 4 games?
Yeah.
You tell Hagel, you tell Cirelli, you're just resting. It's been a long year for you guys.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if there are clauses in their contract where they have to hit certain numbers and, there's something that kicks in. So I don't want to take that away from them. But honestly, if this is about health, my goodness, wouldn't it be nice? Maybe one of those young guys emerge. Maybe a Connor Geeky you look at and say, you know what, he showed me something there.
Mm-hmm.
Or Peltier. Whoa. Less likely. And the other thing, too, maybe those guys can provide you some juice with the remaining 4 games on the schedule.
Yeah, energy. Like we're up.
Energy. Like
which
we're
is kind of
here.
what we see with some teams that are out of it.
We
like
do.
The Rangers have called up some guys, and they're producing for them.
All the time. So why not use it to your advantage? So I don't know what goes on in those conversations, but aren't we intrigued by at least seeing what that line can do, understanding also that you have some players banged up? Why, not that they would rush him, but what's the point of playing in game 80 if you're still nicked up and you have the luxury of playing some other guys who are, maybe they can help you in the postseason too. Maybe. So I liked, maybe that's the biggest thing in addition to Nick Paul, is you saw a young line who's been playing with each other down in the AHL come up, looked pretty good, and let's see if they can build off of it tomorrow night.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. At Bolts Radio.
By the way, the Canadiens scored late in the third, a 6th attacker goal to get the game tied against the Panthers, and then won in the shootout. So that's how they got their 2 points to move into a tie. Buffalo plays tonight at the Rangers.
Yeah.
But it's a back-to-back for Buffalo. So Buffalo plays tonight and tomorrow. They host Columbus tomorrow. That is a huge game for Columbus. It's more important for Columbus than Buffalo, even though we can say Buffalo wants to finish in the top 2 or Buffalo wants to win the division. Buffalo has clinched a playoff spot. Yeah. Columbus needs that game.
I mean, the Lightning are technically in first.
Based on the tiebreaker. Yeah.
Yes. Sabres, Canadiens, all have clinched. That wild card still going on, although you feel like Boston has given themselves some distance.
The fact that they've gotten an overtime point in the last 2 games, I mean, they just needed to get a few more points to put themselves in a position where 9th can't catch them. They're not there yet, but they got closer.
Yes. So that's kind of where we are. But, I mean, Boston, I feel like, is in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
And then you've got, I mean, if you want to throw the Capitals in there, you can. That's fine.
I think Ottawa has the inside track. I mean, Ottawa, I believe, I don't have all the math, of their 4 remaining games, I believe they can actually lose a game and win the other 3, and they would get in. Because no matter what anybody else does. Yeah, because they hold the tiebreaker. The Metro situation might upset that a little bit. So the Islanders are 3 points back. So I stand corrected. Ottawa, if Ottawa goes 3-1 and the Islanders win out, the Islanders would catch Ottawa. I guess Detroit could too. So I take that back. Ottawa, if Ottawa wins their last 4, they're in.
And Ottawa's schedule.
Actually, no, I was correct. They could lose a game. Because if they lose a game and the Islanders make up that game, the Islanders will still be a point behind Ottawa. So erase that. Ottawa can actually make the playoffs no matter what anybody else does by finishing 3-1.
In Ottawa, you look at the remaining games on their schedule. They've got Florida at home, Islanders on the road,
That's
Devils on the road, and then they end with Toronto on home ice.
Correct.
So
they could even go 2-1-1. Like if they get 5 points, I believe they clinch. So I may be wrong about that with Columbus. So I take that back. 3-1 will get them to clinch. Obviously, I'm doing math here on live radio in my head, so I apologize. But Columbus has the inside track to get a wild card. As I say, Columbus. Ottawa has the inside track to get the wild card. Columbus has the best opportunity right now to either catch Ottawa or catch Philadelphia.
Correct.
Columbus could get in as a top 3 team, but they're going to need some help.
That's fair.
Philly's 3 points up on the Islanders and 2 points up on Columbus, but Columbus has the tiebreaker, so that's an advantage against Philly. That's an advantage for Columbus.
Let's run through some questions. There's a lot there we threw at our audience at Bolts Radio. What do you make of the young line that we discussed playing the remaining 4 games, if possible? And are you of the opinion they need to finish strong and somehow that will trickle into the playoffs, or do you come down on another position? Let's go to Mytho says, pretty rough to let in 5 goals in the third. That just can't happen. I wonder if they are just taking it easy knowing they have clinched. I mean, home ice would be nice, but they can't play like this.
Well, look, it is true. They can't play like this. Do we really think they're going to be playing in game 1 of the playoffs like they played last night?
Yeah. Greg says, what in the world happened last night? Well, it was game 78. That's what happened. Was it game 78?
Look, I think it's easy to look at the final and be like, they got absolutely blown out. Look, the Senators have a dangerous rush attack. We talked about that beforehand. We saw it last night. Johansson actually had to make a number of tough saves in the first 2 periods.
Yeah, he did.
To keep Ottawa at 1 goal. But the Lightning had their moments in the first 2 periods too. And it's weird to say in a period in which the Lightning got outscored 5-1, they could have won that period. Or at least tied that period. But every big play, save for Perry's goal, went on the Ottawa side of the ledger. Whether it was a goal scored or a save made. We just got to release Dylan Duke reassigned. So that may answer your question about, are they going to play all 3 of these guys every game down the stretch?
Apparently, heck no.
Yeah.
Heck no. But that's... By the way, I didn't realize Dylan Duke had that type of explosive year down in the AHL.
31
good
goals.
For him.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, that's... You know, look, you see a lot of, he had 15 goals down at the AHL. He's got, 30 goals at any level is, that catches your attention.
He leads the AHL with 17 power play goals, too.
You know, that is, that's what you want those guys to do down in Syracuse. So, Basil says, I don't care who they play. I don't care where they play. Bolts are going to be a handful for anyone. Just need to protect against injuries and falling into bad habits. I think
that is also true, Basil.
I think that's fair. Vlad says, Geeky, Peltier, and the third one aren't the level of the NHL. Even close.
Well, the third one is Dylan Duke.
Oh, look, Vlad, I disagree.
I thought they played a pretty good game last night. They took a little bit of an unlucky minus on the 2-1 goal, which started with... So the Senators do this. I mean, I've seen this so many times, Greg, especially in Ottawa. They do a high flip from their own end. It's like a towering fly ball. Mm-hmm. The outfielder's like looking in the sun. In this instance, it was Radish. He's got a forward bearing down on him, and the puck hits the ice, and it's like spinning, bouncing, and it's coming toward him.
Yeah.
And he's got to try and control that thing, and it got past him. That's how the Senators entered the zone. And Brady Tkachuk had a great game. I mean, he did. Maroon was talking about him on our broadcast. Yeah, he really, put the team on his back, so to speak, and tried to lead the way. He finished with 4 assists. But he kind of made that goal because he didn't give up on a puck. Like, they had it in there. The Lightning kind of alleviated some of the pressure, but Brady stayed out there. And it actually left the zone. And this young defenseman, actually, he's not that young. He's been in the minors for a few years. Cameron Crotty floated it back in. The Lightning had 3 defenders back, but it was like a top spin golf shot. And it like hit the ice and went right to Brady Tkachuk.
Right.
And then he threw it off the side of the net and it pinballed to the blue line. That's when Zetterlund skated onto it. That was the minus that the Geeky line took. Not really their fault, per se. I think the Sens got the bounce on the original entry where it skipped over Radish's stick, which that may have been by design. They definitely got a bounce on that Crotty play where he like flipped it and like it didn't go to anyone except Tkachuk. And then the Senators got a bounce when it hit Chernak's arm and went in. So that was their minus. that was really the only situation where they had where I kind of thought that they were in their own zone, unless I'm not remembering, other parts of the game. I thought that they did well to move the puck up the ice and play a simple game. And, they definitely spent a fair amount of time in the offensive zone, the three of them. And I mentioned Peltier was not out with I think it was actually, who was it? Peltier was out with two other guys. I don't think Geekie or Duke were out with him, but he got that shot in the slot when it was 3-2 Ottawa, and Ullmark made one of his best saves of the night.
Yeah. I think that's right. By the way, you when you mentioned, they're not sun in my eyes and out there like it got
There's
me thinking
no sun
of
in the Ottawa.
Well, remember the scene
in
in The Natural where the right fielder misplays a fly ball and it's a cloudy day and he runs the dugout and the coach goes, "What happened?" He goes, "The sun was in my eyes." He goes and he looks blinding. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. That was one of the funny scenes, but that had me chuckling. Russo says that is. I think it's obvious the Bolts are coasting, just trying to get through the season. They aren't playing with great intensity. I don't care where they finish as long as they're healthy. They can beat anyone. That's
the Greg Linnelli side of the ledger of the opinion of these final games.
That's where I stand. Who's with me? So Greg, this is an interesting take. I'm afraid this will pour over to the playoffs. I want them to stay healthy, but let's get it together.
All right, we're evening the ledger now.
That's what I mean. Like,
two
it's
comments,
50-50.
one on either
it's
side.
A pool.
Yes,
I get it. I don't know what to make of it other than I think this is just, I don't have any data. I'm sure if we found it, it may support one or the other. But the eye test over the last 25, 30 years, just I don't think how you finish necessarily correlates to how you start in the playoffs. I just don't. I don't believe it. FK says, Lightning seem to be limping into the playoffs. I can't believe how bipolar this season has been. They've had stretches where they've looked amazing and other times where they've looked horrible. I mean, look, they have 102 points. You have to go into a hockey season, in my opinion, and know that you're not going to be great for 82 games. There are going to be some downturns. If you don't believe me, ask Colorado. They got off to an incredible start, running away with the division.
Yep.
And then they came back to earth. Why did they come back to earth? Probably a couple of reasons people will give you. I will just tell you the law of averages. In a parity-driven league, to go 72 and 12, or 72 and 10.
Next year, 72 and 12.
That's true. 72 and 10 in a parity-driven league where there's a cap just doesn't it's not meant to happen.
And where emotion plays a role. And if you have that big of a lead, it's hard sometimes to summon the emotion that your opponent might have. The Lightning have been on the wrong end of the emotion metric the last two games. Buffalo was amped up to play the Lightning for various reasons. The crowd was energized to see the Sabres play the Lightning. And the Senators had a lot more at stake last night. That's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a great example on Colorado. So Colorado, I'm not sure if these were games played consecutively, like a home and home, or they were played within a short period of time. But the Blues and the Avalanche recently had two games. One was in Colorado, one was in St. Louis. The Blues beat Colorado in Denver. We talked about the Blues. Like, they are trying to make a late push here. They're going to have very, very little margin for error. But they're in it, right? They are a potential second wildcard team. They go into Denver and they win 3-2. Last night, I think it was last night, the teams met in St. Louis. Colorado won that game. I saw a quote from Jim Montgomery. It's like, in all fairness, it's like, that was the team. That was their real team tonight. Meaning, like, they didn't really get Colorado's best in the first game, and it was Colorado's turn to be like, we just lost to this team. Like, let's go. And they were invested in the rematch, and it sounds like it was not a lopsided final. It was 3-1, but it sounds like it was a lopsided game.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're talking about. When you have a really good team, many times, that team is so good that you get a big lead in the standings, and then you're kind of like, all right, let us know when the playoffs start, right? You're not going to get emotionally up for every game. And if the other team brings more emotion, higher urgency, more of a work boot mentality than you, the game can look tilted against you. But it's hard to match that from the other team night in, night out. And the question is, like, do you want to be matching that? I mean, you do, but do you, Greg? Like, do you want to be investing that much energy and emotion into a game that is, game 78 on your schedule when you clinch a playoff spot? Clearly, one group of fans, that group believes yes. Otherwise, you have bad habits creep in. The other group is saying, just get through these last games. However, you need to, as healthy as you can be.
If this was a team maybe like Ottawa that didn't have a ton of playoff success and experience the last 5-10 years, maybe you feel differently. But most of the Lightning players, or at least the core, have been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, if you believe in experience, if you believe in that, and a lot of people do in sports, you have to believe in that with this team in terms of how they're navigating things, their mindset towards the end of the year. You have to, because you can't say I believe in leadership for other things, but not in this instance. Because now we're kind of cherry picking on whatever point we want to make.
Well, and I think also that following up on that, the Lightning have playoff experience. The fans might say, well, yes, but they've lost in the first round the last 3 years. I actually think that may work to the Lightning's advantage this year.
That's fair.
Because I think that unlike some of these other teams, so every team is going to have its own story going into the playoffs. The Buffalo Sabres are going to be, it's our first playoff game since 2011. The Montreal Canadiens are going to be like, last year we were the 8th seed and we got valuable experience, and now we're back. We're going to build on that. I think the Lightning, especially for the players that have been here for the Cups and then the final in 2022 and then 3 straight losses in the first round, or if you just want to go back to 3 straight losses in the first round and then the previous year. So I'll include like Hagel and Paul who came in. They are like, this ends. This ends now. We are tired of losing in the first round. I heard that from John Cooper Monday morning. He was like, we cannot lose in the first round again. This will be a huge disappointment, basically. So you know what? Anthony Cirelli, Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky, Eric Chernak, Braden Point, they are going to enter this playoff year. They're like, not again. That's the sense that I get from this group. So if they are just kind of like playing out the string here in the regular season, I believe that intensity will get raised once the playoffs begin, because the Lightning have a personal, like within the organization, I think they have a bone to pick about how things have gone the last 3 years. That is not how they see things going this year. That is a different dynamic than probably any opponent that they may get in the first round. They are the only team with a championship pedigree, recent championship pedigree, that has had 3 straight exits in the first round coming on the heels of 3 deep runs. And for the players who have been here for enough of those years, that is just like, we've heard it, it's like unacceptable. This playoff year is going to have their attention. I'm not saying this guarantees a win, but I think that there is no concern on my end that the emotional level is going to be lacking in some way. I think they're going to be right where they need to be in terms of their intensity and determination to change the narrative this year. But that's why you play the games, because you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. I'll just point this out again because we mentioned it a few times. 1-9 in their last 10 home playoff games. That is something else that has to stop. I think we're going to hear that when the playoffs begin, whether they start at home or on the road, and they have to figure out this overtime thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whatever it is, 1-11 in their last 12 playoff overtime games. It's very, very
relevant.
hard to win a series when you cannot win an overtime game.
All relevant.
Yeah.
How they go about correcting that has nothing to do with the remaining 4 games outside of
That's
health.
kind of my point.
Outside of
right?
health.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on all of that. Those are questions in the playoffs. They got to get over that hump. You're not going to get over that hump in the regular season.
No.
That's factual. Tonight, enjoying some Reif Rum, smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reif Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reif Rum by name. Go Bolts. Please enjoy responsibly. Let's get to a few more questions before we sign off for the day. Ranger, I'm having a hard time reading this, but maybe Mish can interpret it better. Greg, 50% agree with 50% of your assessment. Maybe that's what you meant to say. The schedule is tough. They still are 4th in the entire league. I'm nervous about how the constant shuffle of the lines, not nervous about our compete.
I don't know about the shuffling of the lines when the playoffs began. I think they're going to look. Coop shuffles the lines if things are not going well, and he did that. He has done that in the playoffs before, but I think they have an idea of how they want to structure their lines, and it's not going to be a huge departure of what we've seen this year. The Holmberg absence is one that they're going to have to figure out. We talked about that on yesterday's show.
Let's get to Mark. Let me bring you up here, Mark. I agree, Greg. I'm ready for the playoffs. I always can't stand the last week or two of the regular season when they're already clinched. Bring on the playoffs.
Yes, but the fans also get very nervous when we're in the last week of the regular season and the Lightning haven't clinched. We have seen that before.
Deaf Dork. I like that name. What even is goalie interference?
That's kind of like one of those existential questions, like, what is the meaning of life?
Let me tell you, man. Let me tell you.
I actually think I was a little surprised the Lightning challenge last night because to me it looked like Paul pushed Dylan Cousins into the crease.
Do you think it was more just desperation? I
think the Lightning is like it's 4-2.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they felt that they would get the call. Maybe it was a little bit of a let's roll the dice here, and because it wasn't a flagrant push, but there was enough of a push. The heavier push actually happened after Cousins' skate hit the glove of Johansson. What was interesting is the email I got from the league just said replays determined there was no goalie interference. Usually it says replays determined that Nick Paul pushed Dylan Cousins into the crease. So maybe there was some other way they looked at it. It is clear that Cousins' skate made contact with Johansson's glove in the blue, which forced the puck loose. Maybe that's not on a save. Maybe that's how they were looking at it. But I think I come back to the fact that the Lightning player had an impact on Cousins entering the crease. And that's why they lost the challenge. But there have been some goalie interference calls that, I try to be as fair about interpreting it as I can and call it like I see it. And there have been some ones recently. We talked about that Winnipeg-Pittsburgh game where I was like, this one makes no sense to me at all. We've seen a few of those recently.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does, to be honest. Let's see here. E4 says, do we have an update on Hags, Tony, and Holmberg?
We touched on Holmberg. I think that's going to be a press release. Sorelli and Hagel will be, when they're ready to play, we'll probably hear from Coop that they're in tonight. Or not, that they're day-to-day.
3-pack, let me see here, says, have faith in the boys. They always have a few rough games before going on their long win stretches. Let's get Hagel, Sorelli, and others back to 100% and get the cup. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people are.
We've had a diversity of opinion on the show today.
It's trying to get ones we haven't. Jim says, I truly believe we are strategically resting people, just like the Panthers did last year. Leading into the playoffs, they used the Ekblad steroid cap space to call up AHLers during that time.
Well, I do remember the Lightning hammered the Panthers in a late regular season game. I can't remember if it was game 82 or not, but the Panthers did not dress many of their regulars for that game.
Yeah, Andrew was the one that said, I read Ed's article that Dominic James is pushing hard to return. round one. But if you can't, who from Syracuse is most likely to draw in?
Well, I mean, who from Syracuse? I don't know that it's somebody from Syracuse. The Lightning can dress a lineup without Dominic James as it is.
Yeah. Russo again says Florida stunk at the end of last year and Bullets were playing good. How'd that work out? Playoffs are a different animal, and this team has so much experience, they'll be fine. Look, the latter part I don't know when you say they'll be fine in terms of rolling through the playoffs. But I don't think finishing the way they are is going to have any bearing one way or the other. I think we're all looking at this and saying, let's be healthy. And honestly, I think if you talk to John Cooper, I don't know if he's publicly come out and said it, but I think privately he'd probably tell you, I want the health of the team.
Yeah, I think the biggest, I don't want to speak for Coop, but if I were to wager a guess, the biggest takeaway from the road trip so far has not been the results. It's been the Holmberg injury.
Mm-hmm.
What has bothered you more about what has happened? If Coop was being completely honest with us, I think that would probably be his answer.
Yeah.
Can I give you Maroon's answer, by the way, on the penalty box door? Because I asked him.
That's a great, I
yes.
would enjoy that, please.
So there's one person's take on it.
Yeah.
But Pat Maroon has spent enough time in a penalty box in his career. So what he said was two things. First of all, the latch should never, ever be undone until it is time to open the door. So as much as we're like, whoa, the penalty was almost up, he's like, it's too dangerous. That latch needs to be held in place.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you push it and open it when the penalty is up.
Yeah.
So that guy jumped the gun. He's like, secondly, if play is coming toward the penalty box, you do not open the door. That is part of the responsibility as well. He's like, we're the same way on the bench. It's too dangerous. So a player might actually have to stay. This is coming from Pat. A player may have to stay in the penalty box for an extra second or two until play goes past where the door is.
And you see that sometimes, by the way. I'm glad he pointed
Yes.
that out, where like there's a hesitation.
Right. So, I mean, let's say there's a rush chance. I mean, if the guy is skating into the offensive zone past your penalty box and your penalty expires, you have to wait until the activity has passed. So we had two things happen in the Buffalo game. First of all, if it is true that the attendant's the one who loosened the latch and it didn't just like get jostled somehow, which seems unlikely, he was too early. So if you're hearing people saying, well, this is his job and like it's 4 seconds, like, no, according to Maroon, I didn't know this, but I asked him, according to Maroon, there's no moving of the latch seconds before the penalty is up. It happens when the penalty is up. So that was one error. And the second part was, if anything is coming toward the penalty box, you do not open the door. Period. So, look, we don't have the benefit of this sort of experience, but you know who does? John Cooper. Why do you think John Cooper said what he said after the game? Again, we don't know if
Can I ask
the
you a simple
door being
question?
ajar contributed more to the injury, but as I said on yesterday's show, from what we're hearing, the Lightning feel that it did. And we haven't heard this league investigation. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about that. I'm just telling you what Maroon told me when I asked him.
Why do we have a door? Why can't they just jump over?
Well, there's glass there for the penalty box.
There is.
Yeah.
There is, yes. There
But,
is.
you know,
'Cause I was
players,
gonna say,
players
why
on
in
the
the world-
bench do jump over the boards.
Well, that's what I
so
mean.
they
Like,
jump
why
over
do
the
we have
boards
the
to go
door?
on the ice. The door
Yes.
is open to go off
Right.
the ice.
The door is open to get off the ice. But we see
Yes.
some players hurdle it anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that a
like
lot
to
of
avoid
times.
too many men, sometimes you got to jump.
They just jump right over.
Right.
You
Right.
know? I guess maybe there's no good answer. So basically we're saying the person in the penalty box needed to have that locked in.
Again,
and
this
you
isn't
can't,
me saying this.
Yeah,
I'm
no, I mean,
passing
it makes
along the
sense.
explanation that I got. But it sounds like there were two errors made. One was jumping the gun, which shouldn't have happened. And the second was, even if the clock was like at 1 second to 0, you know, like, I don't know how you do it, whether you have to look at the clock and see what's around you, but you have to be aware of where the puck is and where players are, because that's how you could get somebody hurt. You're opening the door as, you know, somebody is being pushed toward that open door. So after hearing that, it makes even more sense why the Lightning were so upset after the game.
It's interesting, but it was good perspective. And
Yeah.
Patty will be with you tomorrow,
Yeah.
right?
In
Montreal.
Saturday.
So that'll be a good game tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Lots to play for a lot of teams. Montreal wants to see if maybe they can get first place in the Atlantic. We'll see how it plays out tomorrow. But we'll be going live, and should be another good show.
Yeah.
Take more questions from people who think they need
I
to finish
think
strong.
I will be at the rink. The Lightning do have a skate scheduled. I'm not too far from the rink, so if there's really nothing happening tomorrow, I may come back to the hotel. Like
See
I
if
did.
Elliot Friedman wants to come on.
You think
if you see
Elliot
him
will
at
be
the
in
rink.
Montreal? Well, I
No,
mean, there's not much happening in Toronto. I don't know that he's there, but yet.
That's right.
I tell you what, though, if Ottawa still has not clinched a playoff spot and they play Toronto in Game 82 in Ottawa, Elliot will be there, I bet. Battle of Ontario. I think the Sens hope that they will have clinched by the time that game rolls around.
Yeah. Partner, great job.
Yeah,
As
you too.
always, we will talk tomorrow. Thanks to Steve Ersnick, and thanks to all of you for listening. We appreciate it. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.